What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Garry sends a warning to Colby Covington. Ian Machado Garry is booked to fight Michael Venom Page at UFC 303. But does that mean he's moved on from fighting Colby Covington? Well, according to the rising welterweight star, it's all up to chaos. Following Garry's victory over Jeff Neal in February, talk about him fighting Covington next kicked into high gear on account of the fighters' war of words. There was speculation that the UFC might look at having Garry fight Covington at the historic UFC 300 event, but ultimately, Garry was tapped to fight MVP on June 29th. Well, as noted, talk about Ian and Colby throwing hands hasn't vanished. Far from it. In a recent interview with MMA Junkie, Garry was asked about the possibility of fighting Colby or if he's moved on. Here's what the 26-year-old had to say.
He's the one who ran. If he wants to fight, the fight's there. I will dog walk him in that octagon and I will rid him from the UFC.
Now, when you hear that, you may think that we could see Garry versus Covington next, if Garry is victorious at UFC 303, but it doesn't really sound like chaos is chomping at the bit to take that fight. Case in point, recently Covington was on the Saucecast podcast. According to Covington, Garry is still a nobody and hasn't done enough to warrant a fight with an A side like him. Colby also claimed he's still recovering from injuries. So if Garry goes out and storms through MVP, could Colby change his mind? Maybe. But you have to wonder if, at that point, the UFC might look at someone other than Covington anyways. Israel Adesanya sends a message to Michael Chandler. Ever since it was announced that Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler are no longer going to battle at UFC 303, many people have been advising Chandler to just go and fight. Well, one person who is in that camp is Israel Adesanya. If you follow Chandler, you know that Iron Mike hasn't fought since November 2022, when he was submitted by Dustin Poirier. Well, while discussing the situation on his YouTube channel recently, Adesanya advised Chandler to go ahead and fight, rather than wait any more for the McGregor scrap.
I think that fight's going to happen regardless, so Chandler should just take a fight, and that's even better for him, win or lose, because he'll still get more reps. Take a fight regardless. That Conor fight's always going to be there, because they've both faced each other in tough beef, all that kind of stuff, being sprinkled all over it, so yeah.
So you can definitely understand why some people are calling on Chandler to just fight someone. After all, he's 38 now, and well over a year has gone by without him competing. Further, and with all due respect to the last stylebender, is the McGregor fight always going to be there for Mike? Since that video was posted on YouTube, Conor has revealed that a broken pinky toe was what caused him to withdraw from UFC 303. Now, given that's not a super serious injury, yes, there's reasons to think McGregor Chandler could get rebooked fairly soon. But what's interesting is that Conor also noted he'll be ready to fight soon, Chandler or not, which has some folks wondering if maybe the Notorious One will ask the UFC to go with a different matchup. And let's be honest, it never really seemed like Conor was super hyped about fighting Chandler to begin with, right? All that aside, the news a broken pinky toe is behind Conor's continued absence from the octagon prompted blowback from his rivals. Case in point, Islam Makhachev posted, "You don't need a pinky toe for a fight, LOL, chicken," and followed up by taking a shot at Michael Chandler saying, "And my condolences to Michael Hachiko Chandler." Hachiko, meaning a Japanese Akita dog that was remembered for his loyalty to its owner, referring to Conor McGregor being Michael Chandler's owner. And Rafael dos Anjos, who McGregor repeatedly torched back in 2016 when he withdrew from their scheduled fight with a broken foot, fired off this. "That's the difference between you and me, Conor. You finally got exposed. You got a pinky toe injury while I got a broken foot." Let me know what you guys think on the comments below. So what do you all think? Does RDA have a point? Well, Conor McGregor fired back at the MMA community criticizing Michael Chandler for waiting on the fight. Conor tweeted, "Chandler is getting paid 10x of what his contract states for other fights, meaning he would need to fight 10 fights to make what he would make in this one. I'm the one." And followed it up with, "For those saying he could have fought 2 or 3 times by now, etc., he'd need 10 to break even with this check." Do you think Michael Chandler should continue to wait for Conor McGregor or fight someone else? Up next, Tom Aspinall talks about UFC 304 preparation for late start time. Tom Aspinall continues to prepare for his battle with Curtis Blaydes at UFC 304. It's an intriguing fight for various reasons, but it's also an interesting matchup since it's going to take place when Aspinall is probably used to smashing the snooze button. That's because UFC 304 is going to go down in Manchester, England, but the UFC is holding the event during its typical pay-per-view hours here in North America. Well, recently, Aspinall reported he's been talking with his fellow countryman, Leon Edwards, in regards to how he's preparing to fight when most Brits are still rubbing sleep out of their eyes. More recently, in our exclusive interview with Tom Aspinall, brought to you by Jose Cuervo and the One Round Challenge, the interim heavyweight champion was asked again about this issue.
Well, I mean, speaking of that, being that it's in England, you mentioned that you talked to Leon Edwards, getting some advice for sleeping for this type of event, especially that you're going to be fighting so early in the morning. So how's that going for you so far?
Well, to be honest, we're still over 6 weeks away at this point, so I've not really adjusted anything so far. But I spoke to Leon in depth a few days ago. I know Leon's bringing in a sleep I don't know if you call it a sleep therapist, sleeping coach, I don't know. But right now, Leon Edwards is my sleeping coach. I'm just listening. I'm listening to what he's doing, and I'm basically mirroring the same thing. So it means doing, just kind of switching the time zone around a little bit and slowly but surely creeping later and later with your training. And yeah, being active at 4 or 5 a.m. is obviously something I'm not used to at this point, but you know, we got to move with it. There's gonna be absolutely unbelievable fights that night. The matchups are probably, I would say, the best that we've ever had in the UK at least, and it's just going to be an amazing card for people all around the world. So I would recommend everybody to tune in, like the even matches from the top of the card to the bottom of the card. So, you know, would I like a different time zone? Yeah, I would. I'm not going to be honest, but the fight's going to be exciting regardless, and I think everybody should tune in because it's got to be right for everybody.
Gotcha. Do you think the late start time is going to have any effect on your performance?
No. I'm a professional athlete at the highest level, and I will adjust myself accordingly. Like that's what we do. It's all about these small percentages being the best in the world, and you either move with it or you're going to get left behind, and I am going to be moving with it. That's what I'm choosing, to move with it. So I'll make sure that on the 27th of July, my body and my mind will be completely in tune to fighting at 5 a.m. if I need to.
Huge shout out to Cuervo for that interview with Tom Aspinall. We truly appreciate it. Make sure to check out the One Round Challenge with Tom. But by the sounds of it, both Aspinall and Edwards are taking steps to help ensure they're firing on all cylinders at UFC 304. Now, let's take a look at Alex Pereira is the face of the UFC? It's hard to find a fighter right now who has more buzz than Alex Pereira. So much so, some folks are questioning if Poatan has become the face of the UFC. Pereira began 2024 with a ridiculous amount of momentum behind him on account of him winning his second UFC championship last November by stopping Jiri Prochazka. Poatan then proceeded to drop jaws yet again by bombing out Jamal Hill in April at UFC 300. Well, just when Pereira's stock was already at an all-time high, he raised the bar once more by agreeing to fight Prochazka at UFC 303 on short notice. So all this prompted Daniel Cormier to question whether the Brazilian star has become the frontman of the UFC.
Alex Pereira headlined Madison Square Garden twice. He headlined UFC 300, which was a monster. He steps in again on short notice for UFC 303. Dude is getting paid. But not only is he getting paid, Alex Pereira, star, continues to grow. Now, I get it, Chill. It will always be hard to top Conor McGregor in regards to star power. But you still got Israel Adesanya. You still got John Jones. But when I think about the face of the company, because of his durability, his activity, his willingness to fight, he's a 2-division champion, he's always present. Is Alex Pereira now the face of the UFC?
It's an interesting question, no doubt, and if you're wondering what Chael Sonnen said, he acknowledged Poatan is getting there. The two also noted that Sean O'Malley is one of the UFC's biggest stars and draws. But what do you think? Is Pereira the face of the UFC? And if he isn't yet, what if he takes out Prochazka again and then challenges for the heavyweight title in, say, the next 6 months? Next, Dominick Reyes calls out UFC judging. It's been over 4 years now since Dominick Reyes lost a controversial decision to John Jones at UFC 247. But not surprisingly, the powerful light heavyweight still has an issue with how the judges scored that fight, and others for that matter. If you're new to MMA and haven't gone down the UFC Fight Pass rabbit hole to watch fights of Jones, you might not know that many people believe Bones lost to Reyes in 2020. The latter shocked the MMA world by outstriking Jones in the first 3 rounds, and as a result, Many believed we were about to hear and knew when the scores were read out. Even UFC boss man Dana White thought that would be the case. Ultimately, however, Jones was awarded the fight by all 3 judges. Well, following Reyes' highlight reel finish of Dustin Jacoby earlier this month, he appeared on the Jackson podcast. While talking about his epic fight with Jones and everything he lost on account of the judge's decision, Reyes reported he wants to be an agent of change.
It is what it is. It's something that I would like to address, like in the future, kind of come together with fighters and organizations and create a proper, like, how to become a judge criteria, instead of like, oh, you have experience in boxing and you have 40 years of judging, blah, blah, blah. Like, nah, let's have an actual like course, an online course where you have to pass tests. Like, this is how you judge an MMA fight. And then the higher your scores, and then you have high scores, and then you judge in the actual live events. If you do well, your score counts. So like, it accumulates over time, and if you're a really good judge, you'll only judge championship fights and high-level fights, right? That matter, where it's a lot of money, where our lives are on the line. Like, a lot, I lost a lot, off that moment.
Yeah.
Like I said, lives are at stake here, and for me, that's the thing I'm thinking about and want to do. I want to do something about it. I don't want to just talk about it and be upset about it. I want to go and actually do something about it when it's all said and done.
Yep, Reyes certainly isn't the only person who wants to see changes made, and extensive ones at that, for the judging criteria and how they're trained. Let's hope it happens. Alex Pereira breaks silence on Jiri Prochazka fight. We've already discussed how massive of a star Alex Pereira is becoming, and how he could reach historic heights later this year or in 2025. But much of that is contingent on him beating Jiri Prochazka for a second time at UFC 303. When Poatan battled the now former champ for the first time last year, he secured the vacant light heavyweight crown by stopping Prochazka in the second round. So how does Pereira see his second scrap with Prochazka unfolding, who has since recorded another head-turning stoppage win over Alexander Rakic? Well, while speaking with the Mac Life recently, Pereira was asked if he thinks Jiri will present a different challenge than before.
I don't think that he would have changed that much. It hasn't been that long. I was just watching his last fight yesterday, and obviously you can't compare because it's a different fight, but I don't think he was able to change that much since our last fight. And if there's one thing that he could maybe change is his takedown.
Yes, it's going to be fascinating to see what kind of game plan the Czech Samurai employs at UFC 303, and if his wrestling plays a bigger role. If you need a refresher, in their first encounter, Jiri finished one of 2 takedowns he attempted in the fight. Now, let's get to UFC Fight Updates. UFC 303 has undergone yet another change, as it's been announced that Carlos Ulberg will no longer fight Anthony Smith. The New Zealander fighter, who was originally brought in to fight Jamal Hill at the event, has dropped out due to injury. Instead, Smith will throw hands with Roman Dolidze, which is also a very compelling matchup at 205 pounds. The UFC has booked another fight for its August 10th Las Vegas card, as Yana Santos will battle Chelsea Chandler in a bantamweight contest. The UFC's next Abu Dhabi card on August 3rd has a new middleweight matchup, as Cedric Dumas will fight Denis Tululin. The two were supposed to fight this weekend, but Dumas couldn't compete for logistical reasons. And Kamaru Usman's brother, Muhammad Usman, is going to throw down with Thomas Peterson at the UFC's July 20th card in Vegas. Usman had won 5 straight before he dropped the decision to Mick Parkin in March. So it'll be interesting to see if he starts another run, or if Peterson will pick up his first UFC win. Khamzat Chimaev reveals bad news. Alexander Gustafsson revealed information about Khamzat's illness as Alex trained with him leading up to his canceled fight. Alexander said, "There's something with his body that reacts to hard training because he's the hardest worker in the room. They have to run some tests and see what the background is, whether there's something in his body that's reacting to the hard training. He very easily catches a cold, for example, a running nose, coughing, symptoms that are not a big deal at all. We all get that. But I've seen when he increases his training a lot, I know his body reacts differently to the training. I don't know where it comes from. I can't even imagine how frustrated he is. I know he doesn't feel good at all. He's ill, very ill. He trains so hard, it's inhuman the way he trains. But his illness is not because he overtrains. This is a whole different level of illness." The MMA community reacted to this news by saying, "Gus is a former light heavyweight belt challenger and arguably beat Jones. So if he is saying this, it's inhuman how he trains, then that means something. For me, Khamzat may be overtraining and therefore is run down, so it makes sense that his immune system gets compromised easily." Bro, we all know it's PED and IV use, LOL. That's why Islam and Habib's boys be pulling out of fights like crazy, and then the fake illness, LOL. Khamzat Chimaev, the undisputed champion of pre-fight trash talk and post-fight hospital visits. Do you think we'll see Khamzat in the octagon by the end of the year? Top comments. Why the F would Holloway want that fight when he's fighting Ilya next? Garry's last fight was horrible, boring AF. And this fight against Venom is going to be another snoozer, just two guys waiting for the other to throw first. Chandler just waited 2 years for a money fight. Not what BMFs do. Holloway beats Chandler, then we get McGregor versus Holloway 2.